First up, cookies. I think all of us have experienced what our previous commissioner described as having the joy sucked out of browsing the internet by those annoying pop-ups. And it's fascinating. I was talking to a senior lawmaker who genuinely thought that was the best technology companies could do. That this was them trying their hardest to make it as straightforward, as easy as it can be. And clearly, that is not the case. We are seeing deliberate attempts by these systems to manipulate individuals and change their behaviour. And there is a broad consensus and lots of cry of support out to other regulators who've taken lead on this, but we're also doing work in this space, that clearly there are some basic requirements around cookies that they should have. For example, reject all should be at the top level, not hidden several layers deeper down to make it harder for you to exercise your choice, to nudge you into particular behaviours. But what's, I think, quite fascinating about the cookies, that's the very visible part, but that not only works to erode your choice in that circumstance, it works to erode trust in privacy as a profession and a concept. We are presented with the idea that the purpose of the GDPR, the benefit it has brought, is annoying banners on every website. And similarly, we can see discussions coming that with some of the work around children, we're going to have that presented as putting annoying age gates on every website. These are not the purposes of this legislation or the benefits, and without pressure to reduce this nudge behaviour to undermine people, we're likely to see further harm to our broader goals. So I think this is very important. We've looked at the top 50 sites by volume in the UK, and over half of them are illegal, are breaking the rules. Now, what was delightful is when we reached out to these organisations, many of them explained they already had a programme in place to fix that. I don't know how wet that ink was, but I'm going to just allow it, and we'll see the kind of improvements we're looking for. And as was trailed earlier in the main session, we have come out in support of Google, finally putting reject all on the top page. Now, if Google can do that, there's pretty much no excuse for anyone else, and we will steadily work our way through everyone else. So, but what's fascinating is imagining a world in which everybody can have their right choice online is still a nudge and unpleasant environment. The concept that this idea that in the moment of trying to achieve something, we want to present it with enough detail about a massively complex circumstance in order to be able to make an informed decision when actually we just want to buy the discount whatever we're trying to get online is nonsense. And we're doing some work across the G7, because any action here needs to be global in scope, to look at how we automate that process. How by either in the browser or in the operating system you capture your enduring preferences, and that's negotiated with the end site to achieve the outcome you want. Because I think at the heart, as linked to the idea of these contracts being entered into, there is a fundamental asymmetry here. And the idea of an individual having the power against billions of pounds being spent to A/B test and find the most excellent manipulative way to get you to make choices against your preference is not acceptable. And, as we heard in the 5G session, things like that, we're moving to an environment where there's going to be more and more machine to machine. You'll be driving your car, and your car will be connecting to systems to share your data, to receive services back. I don't want people on the motorway stopping to look through and scroll through a thing and accept and deny and set their preferences. Clearly, that needs to be automated. And developing a language where we can express our consent in an enduring way, and particularly in a collective way. I don't have the knowledge and interest to assess every website for this. Why can't I sign up to a service that accepts and matches my needs? When I look to consume news, I don't read every news article in the world and then pick which ones are editorially interesting. I read a particular newspaper. Visit a particular newspaper website. But, I read the particular, and the different editorial lines on those newspapers align to their purchasers' desires. Why is there not a mechanism to do that for my cookie choices? Some people may wish to have wide open and share their data widely. And that's where some of these initiatives in the past have failed, because, of course, a lack of a no is not a positive yes. So we need a system that does allow people to express their desire to have their data be widely misused. Clearly, I would encourage them not to do that, but I actually want to respect people's choices, even if those choices don't agree with where I've selected as a profession. So that's the work around cookies. Then moving on to children. We've talked a lot about the sort of theories around these kind of nudge techniques potentially being illegal, the way they're used in cookies. in the UK's children's code, code number 13, lucky for some, is do not use nudge techniques to lead or encourage children to provide unnecessary personal data or turn off privacy protections. And one of the things I'm very proud of about the work my team has achieved in this space is we've seen some of the large platforms alter this not just for the UK, but for globally, so that children signing up to some of the largest social media sites were taken through a consent process that drew them down to some very dangerous defaults and nudged them constantly to reset them to more dangerous. That now doesn't happen. And that shows that regulatory intervention framed under a framework of what's acceptable can actually make a difference here. It is easy, I think, sometimes in the face of the volume and persistence of some of these manipulative techniques to give up. You don't have to. But things can get better. So that's cookies, that's children. Then choice architecture. One of the delights of working in the UK is that there are a large number of regulators with a keen interest in digital topics. And we've had the very great pleasure through the Digital Regulators Cooperation Forum doing bilateral work with the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, because often the systems that are using our personal data to manipulate particular outcomes are also manipulating markets or treating customers unfairly with that outcome. So there's a shared regulatory interest in these kind of topics, and we've worked very closely. It's through this I've learned fascinating terms like sensory manipulation, using bing sounds, buzzes, or things to draw you to particular ways, using our more visceral ways of engaging to cut past that rational human mind to get to our more biological. And sludge is my favourite. Sludge is the idea that, subscribing is very easy, but unsubscribing you have to write a letter and post it to this address, and the thing's only open on a Tuesday. So it's not, none of the steps are stopping you, but they're just adding delay and pain and discomfort to get there. Now, looking to the future, coming soon, our final area. I want to talk just for a second. One of the fascinating things is I've come across some circumstances where the sort of GDPR conception of consent, the one we obviously use UK GDPR and our data protection, isn't always providing the best outcome for individuals. I wanted to leave that as a thought for you. There's a circumstance where those who are having problems with gambling can self-exclude themselves. They can choose to say, I don't want to be able to gamble. If I go into a gambling shop, they want them to throw them out. I want my credit cards blocked so I can't use any of these systems online. A very powerful way. But what generally happens with those individuals is at some point during the period of having got to the bottom and said, no, I want to stop, they have a moment of weakness and try and start again. They want to withdraw their consent for the processing to exclude them because they want to get back to gambling. But clearly, that isn't necessarily in their best interest. So those schemes face a challenge of complying when actually they're trying to do the right thing, which I think is an interesting question. But now we come to the part to really depress and give you fears for the future. Every talk here has to end with a little bit of that, I'm sure. I want to talk about the worst manipulation I've ever seen, the worst nudge technique. It's an app. It's thankfully not available in Europe. It's a US app aimed at children, where the app learns what your child's favourite pet is. You know, it tries you out with kittens and puppies and horses, finds the one, and then you personalise that, so you get a really close, affectionate relationship with this avatar of this pet. And then animal control come and take the pet away and contact you in the game and say, if you don't pay, we're going to put your pet down. That's pretty manipulative, right? Very profitable. Lots of people buy the little gems to save their beloved pets. But that's based just on the level of knowledge they can gain through your choices in an app. Future technologies around the emotion detection touched on in AI, but increasingly eye tracking to have data about our intents subconsciously beneath us. There's a fascinating idea that we all have different faces in different places. I might have a public face where I make terrible dad jokes. I have a private face with my family where I make terrible dad jokes. And I have an internal voice where I make terrible dad jokes. And this possibly that congruence is healthy in some ways, but in other ways it can be much more constructive for a person to have different views. And one of the fascinating things is that internal voice has increasingly become externalized. It used to be, you think, I wonder what that weird spot is on my hand. Could that be something worrying? And I used to just think that. No one would know. It wasn't my private voice. It was my public voice. Now I type it into a search engine. So Google and I have a great idea of my internal voice. But of course, with these technologies around brain monitoring, around eye tracking, that internal voice, or even that subconscious voice that I don't even have conscious access to, is being broadcast and collected and potentially used against me. And if you want truly, if you thought the children's pets being put down for profit was scary enough, there are some research work going on. I know of a military research group doing this, looking at how to not only read brain state, but write brain state. They're interested in removing fear from soldiers, which no bad has ever come from manipulating the mental state of armies, either through getting them fed up, but doing it electronically. So we face a fascinating time where the level of intimate data being collected about us is only going to increase. And unless there are constraints put on it, the pressures of commercial incentives, the desire to compete, the desire to operate are going to exploit that data. And we, as data protection professionals, stand at the point where we can make a difference here. So I ask you, please work through all the efforts you have to extend the kind of constraints we have over this behaviour, to point out to people that, yes, you can manipulate people in the short term, but when they discover that kind of behaviour, and I can assure you the parents who were forced to pay to save their children's virtual pets were not happy with that company and do not recommend it to others. So the long-term effect of short-term exploitation is going to be negative. Our role is to help people reduce that window and get them to a sustainable way where these kind of knowledge of our intimate thoughts and behaviours can be used to empower us, not nudge us into behaviours that aren't in our interest.